Hey everyone, and welcome back to the AnzenGuard Podcast. I'm Michael Reynolds, and I'm here with Laura Wilson. Today, we're going to be diving into something that affects just about everyone: identity theft and identity fraud. You know, in our digital world these days, this is something we all have to be aware of, and the numbers are pretty scary. We were looking at some research from Aura, all about cookies and all-state identity protection. And in 2023 alone, there were over 5.4 million Americans who were victims of this, with losses totaling $10 billion. So this is a really, really serious issue.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And it's often misunderstood. You know, people hear identity theft and identity fraud, and they're not always sure what the difference is.
Right. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Exactly. So
Right.
Understanding that order is key to understanding the whole picture. So let me give you a simple way to think about it. Imagine somebody steals a car. That's identity theft. They've taken something that doesn't belong to them. Your personal information, your social security number, your driver's license, your credit card details. It's all up for grabs.
Okay. So the thief has driven off with our sensitive information. What happens next?
Well, then they take that stolen car for a joyride. Maybe use it to commit another crime, or even sell it off for a profit. That's identity fraud. They're using your stolen information for their own personal gain.
So identity theft is the stealing of the information, and identity fraud is what they actually do with it afterwards. That makes sense. But could somebody steal my information and not actually use it?
Absolutely. They might steal a whole bunch of cars and then sell those cars to other criminals to do the joyriding and the illegal stuff. And that's actually what happens on the dark web. Your information is stolen, and then it's packaged up and sold to somebody else, who then uses that to commit the fraud.
Wow. I didn't realize there was a whole market out there like that.
Yeah, it's a scary reality. But it's important to be aware of. And sometimes these criminals don't even need to steal complete identities. They can create entirely fake identities, like Frankenstein's monster, piecing together bits and pieces of information from different sources. And that's called synthetic identity fraud. And it's really tough to trace.
I feel like we're walking around with targets on our backs.
In a way, we are. And that's why we're here, to help you understand the risks and what you can do to protect yourself. And a good place to start is by looking at some real-world examples. We read a story about a woman in Houston. She was applying for a job, filled out all the forms, provided copies of her driver's license and social security card. And then poof, the so-called hiring manager vanished. And she never heard back. Her identity was stolen right from under her nose.
See, that's what's so scary about this. You think you're doing everything right, like applying for a job,
Right.
and then boom, you become a victim.
It can happen to anyone, anywhere. There was another case in Fairfield, Texas. An entire neighborhood was targeted. Someone broke into mailboxes and stole tax returns, bank statements, anything they could get their hands on. This wasn't some high-tech hacking scheme. It was good old-fashioned mail theft.
It's a good reminder that it's not just about our online security, but we have to be aware of our physical surroundings as well. But let's talk about those online threats. What are some of the most common ways our information gets stolen?
Well, data breaches are a big one. Hackers target companies and organizations. They steal massive amounts of data, often including personal information. We're talking millions of people affected by a single breach. Just last year, over 350 million people were impacted by data breaches.
350 million. That's almost everyone in the United States.
It's a staggering number, and it really highlights how vulnerable we are. Then there's phishing. Scammers try to trick you into giving them your information. They'll impersonate banks, government agencies, even friends or family. They create a sense of urgency, like your account's been compromised, you need to act now. And they pressure you into clicking on a bad link or giving up your passwords.
Yeah, you get those emails all the time. You know your Amazon account has been suspended.
Exactly. And it's getting more sophisticated all the time. There was a case where someone's phone was taken over just by clicking a link in a text message. It's called the SIM swap attack, and it's becoming more and more common.
That's terrifying. It's like they can just get into your life through your phone.
It is scary. And let's not forget about good old-fashioned mail theft, which has actually seen a huge increase between 2018 and 2023. Mail theft reports went up by over 400%.
400%. That's insane.
It is. And it makes sense. You know, as more people rely on online banking and digital statements, criminals are targeting those physical mailboxes, knowing that they might find checks, credit card offers, even social security numbers just sitting there.
So we've got data breaches, phishing scams, mail theft. Anything else?
Don't forget about malware, malicious software. That can be installed on your computer or smartphone, often without you even knowing it. It can track your keystrokes, steal your passwords, even give hackers remote access to your device.
It's like they're watching our every move. So we've talked about all the ways that our information can be stolen. But what about the consequences? What happens when somebody actually uses our stolen identity? I mean, it's not just about someone maxing out our credit card, is it?
No, it's not. It can be much, much worse than that. And that's what we're going to talk about after the break, when we explore the devastating impact identity fraud can have on your life.
Welcome back to the AnzenGuard Podcast. Before we took a breath there, we were talking about all the ways that your identity can be stolen, data breaches, phishing scams, even just grabbing mail from your mailbox. It can be pretty unnerving, but it's important to remember that knowledge is power. The more you know about how identity theft works, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
Right. And we were just about to dive into the consequences of identity fraud. So when those criminals actually start using our stolen information, what happens then?
Well, let's start with the financial impact. Imagine waking up to discover that your bank account's been emptied, new credit cards have been opened in your name, and you're suddenly drowning in debt. That you never incurred. Your credit score plummets, making it impossible to get a loan, rent an apartment, or even land a job.
Okay, so that's definitely worst case scenario, but it sounds like it could get even worse than that. Oh, it absolutely can. Identity thieves can use your information to commit tax fraud, filing fake returns, and pocketing the refunds. They can even apply for government benefits in your name, stealing money that's intended for those in need. In fact, between 2022 and 2023, government benefit fraud increased by a staggering 82%. It was the biggest increase among all types of identity theft.
82%? That's unbelievable.
It is, and the damage can be long-lasting. We read a story about a man in Los Angeles who spent 2 years in prison for crimes he didn't commit, it turned out, that someone had been using his stolen identity for almost 40 years.
40 years. That's just heartbreaking that somebody could have their life so drastically altered by something completely out of their control.
It is, and it's a chilling reminder of just how serious identity theft can be. It's not just about financial loss. It can impact your reputation, your freedom, even your sense of self. And here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Children are especially vulnerable to identity theft.
Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. They have clean credit histories. Criminals can use their social security numbers to open credit card accounts, take out loans, even rent apartments, all without anyone noticing for years. By the time the child becomes an adult and tries to apply for credit, their credit score is already ruined.
Wow. I never even thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So we've got these criminals out there stealing identities, racking up debt, ruining credit scores, even committing crimes in other people's names. This all sounds pretty overwhelming. What can we actually do to protect ourselves?
Don't panic. There are a lot of things that you can do. The first step is understanding the different types of identity fraud that are out there. We've talked about some of them already, like tax fraud, government benefit fraud. But there are others, like criminal identity theft, where someone uses your information. To avoid getting caught for a crime, they might give your name to the police if they're pulled over, or use your ID if they're arrested.
So they're using your good name to stay out of trouble.
Exactly. And then there's synthetic identity theft, which we talked about earlier, where criminals create entirely fake identities by combining bits and pieces of stolen information.
Okay, so we know what to look out for, but what can we do to actually prevent these things from happening in the first place?
Well, a healthy dose of skepticism can go a long way. Be wary of unsolicited emails, phone calls, or text messages asking for your personal information. Don't click on links from unknown senders or open attachments you weren't expecting. And remember, legitimate organizations will never ask for your passwords or PINs over email or text message.
Right. That's good advice. I know I'm guilty of clicking on things that I probably shouldn't sometimes.
We've all been there. But the key is to slow down, think critically, and trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And speaking of things feeling off, let's talk about warning signs. How can you tell if your identity might have been compromised?
Yeah. What are some red flags we should be looking out for?
Keep an eye out for any unfamiliar activity on your accounts. Are there charges on your credit card statement that you don't recognize? Have you received bills for services you never signed up for? Has your credit card been denied unexpectedly? These could all be signs that something's not right.
What about those credit reports? You mentioned that we can get free copies of those, right?
Absolutely. You can get a free copy of your credit report from each of the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, once a year. Through annualcreditreport.com, it's a good idea to check them regularly, look for any errors or accounts you don't recognize. Catching these things early can make a huge difference.
Okay, so let's say we've spotted some suspicious activity, and we think our identity might have been stolen. What do we do? Who do we call? What are the steps?
First, don't panic. Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And then take immediate action.
All right, deep breath. Now what?
The first thing you need to do is contact the companies. Where you believe the fraud has occurred, let them know that you suspect your account has been compromised and ask them to freeze or close the account.
Okay, so if there are charges on my credit card that I didn't make, I should call my credit card company right away.
Exactly. And if you believe your bank account has been compromised, call your bank immediately. They can help you secure your account and prevent any further unauthorized transactions.
Got it. What else?
You also need to report the identity theft to the Federal Trade Commission. They have a website dedicated to identity theft, identitytheft.gov, where you can file a report online. This will help the FTC track down the criminals and stop them from victimizing others.
Okay, so we're calling the companies where the fraud happened, reporting it to the FTC. Anything else we can do to protect ourselves?
Yes. Consider placing a fraud alert or a credit freeze on your credit reports.
Hold on a second. What exactly are fraud alerts and credit freezes?
A fraud alert is like a red flag on your credit report. It tells creditors to take extra steps to verify your identity. Before extending credit, it's free, and it stays on your report for a year. A credit freeze, on the other hand, is like a lock on your credit. It prevents anyone, including yourself, from opening new accounts in your name without your express authorization.
Okay, so a fraud alert is like a warning sign, and a credit freeze is like putting everything on lockdown.
Exactly. It's one of the most effective ways to protect yourself from further damage if you suspect that your information has been compromised.
That makes sense. So we're monitoring our accounts, checking our credit reports, watching out for red flags, and taking action if we suspect fraud. Is there anything else we can do to make ourselves less vulnerable?
Absolutely. There are a lot of proactive steps you can take to protect yourself, and we're going to explore all of those after the break.
Welcome back to the AnzenGuard Podcast. So we were talking about all the things you can do to make yourself less vulnerable.
Right. It feels like a minefield out there. What can we actually do to protect ourselves? Well, it all starts with good cyber hygiene. Think of it as washing your hands for your digital life.
I like that. So what does digital hand washing look like?
Well, first and foremost, strong passwords. And I don't just mean password 123. Use a combination of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. And for goodness sakes, don't use the same password for multiple accounts. It's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your office.
Yeah, makes sense. So strong, unique passwords for everything. What else?
Enable two-factor authentication whenever possible. It adds an extra layer of security by requiring you to enter a code from your phone or email. In addition to your password, it might seem like a hassle, but it's a really powerful deterrent for hackers.
Okay, two-factor authentication. Check. What about all the personal information that we share online? Social media, shopping, all that stuff.
Be mindful of what you post and where you post it. Do you really need to share your birthday, home address, your mother's maiden name with the entire internet? Probably not. The less information you put out there, the less the criminals have to work with.
Okay, lock down those social media profiles. Be careful about what we share online. What about those phishing scams? Any tips for avoiding those?
Well, if you get an email or text message or phone call, that seems suspicious. Don't click on any links or open any attachments. Instead, contact the organization directly using a phone number or website that you know is legitimate. Remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Don't click, don't open, verify. Got it. We talked about securing our physical mail. Any tips for that?
Invest in a locking mailbox or use a secure mail drop-off location. Shred any documents that contain sensitive information before discarding them. And be sure to collect your mail promptly. Don't leave it sitting in the mailbox for days on end.
Right, it's like an open invitation.
Exactly.
So we're being cautious online, we're securing our physical mail. Anything else?
Well, if you're really looking for an extra layer of protection, consider signing up for an identity theft protection service. These services offer a variety of features, like credit monitoring and fraud alerts, even identity theft insurance.
So it's like having a personal bodyguard.
Exactly. They can help you monitor your accounts, detect any suspicious activity, and even assist you with the recovery process if your identity is stolen.
That's great. Well, folks, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of identity theft and fraud. It's a scary topic, but being aware of the risks and taking these steps to protect ourselves go a long way. I'm Michael Reynolds.
And I'm Laura Wilson.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this episode with your friends and family. Until next time, stay safe out there.